Hi, my name's Tiger. I'm a California retired teacher. I taught 30 years from 1993 to 2024. And if you're good in math, you would say, well, that's 31 years. I spent a year doing an internship working toward my master's in counseling. But I'd like to share my experiences, 15 years out of the closet, 15 years in the closet. And when I was out of the closet, often I'd have students coming to me sharing their experiences of being LGBT in the classroom. I like to threefold share a story, an LGBT story, to read a book, a children's LGBT book, and number three, remind California teachers of some of the laws in California. So with that, I'd like to read one possible LGBT book to read in the classroom. Boys Dance. Boys Dance. And you might think, well, that's not necessarily LGBT. That's true. But that could be considered as non-gender conforming, because sometimes students will say, well, boys aren't supposed to dance. And it's important to remind them that boys are allowed to dance. There's no law, there's no rule that says boys are not supposed to dance. So here's the book. Boys Dance by John Robert Ullman. Illustrations by Luciano Lozano. Boys Dance. Shorts and socks and shoes on tight. You're set to dance with all your might. By the way, I have 4 grandsons, and I can imagine them listening to this book, just enthused, focusing on the illustrations. Prepare to step and spin and sway as you begin to learn ballet. Like each brilliant ballet star, you'll start with stretches at the bar. Watch the teacher show and tell before your turn to try as well. Then as music starts to play, 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 play. Plie. Holding on so you'll stay steady. Don't let go until you're ready. You're an athlete, and your mission's mastering all 5 positions. First position, second position, third position, fourth position, fifth position. Muscles warm, so you're not sore. It's time to move onto the floor. Training hard, you'll break a sweat while you rehearse your pirouette. Polishing a tour on lair, turn with feeling, land with flair. Leap across the studio with perfect postures like a pro. Let these leading men inspire as you practice and perspire. So there's also these little synopses, reminders of some of our ballet and dance professionals. Herman Corneo, David Hallberg, James Whiteside, Calvin Royal III. Growing stronger day by day, dreams of parts that you play. Pirates, villains too. Slay the mouse king in a coup. That's from the Nutcracker. Listen, fellow dancers high. Lifting fellow dancers high means staying sturdy, strong and spry. Beyond ballet, add your pizzazz to modern hip-hop, tap, or jazz. Savion Glover, more aficionados of dance. Paul Taylor, Bob Fosse, Gregory Hines, Gene Kelly. With dancing skills, you're sure to soar in sports, at school, and so much more. Because dance is exercise and it's expression. Whatever passions you pursue, whatever matters most is being you. And then here are the little synopses about different ballet dances. So that was one. I wanted to read a story. With that story also reminds me of this story. How to be cool in third grade. When I taught third grade, when we would come to a section where the protagonist, Robbie, is filling his backpack and he comes to a pretty pink pony ruler and he says, "Oh no, boys don't have pretty pink rulers." That was an opportunity for me to have a discussion with my classroom and ask my students, "What do you think? Are boys allowed to have a pretty pink pony ruler in their backpacks?" And few students would say, "No, boys aren't supposed to have it." And a lot of students would say, "Yes, of course it's okay." Those students who have an understanding of diversity and respect. And it was not an opportunity for me to push an agenda. It's really an opportunity, not that I would, but it's an opportunity for me to remind students to respect all students. And say, regardless of how you feel, which is your own opinion, which is your right to have an opinion on that, we want to remember to respect anyone. So if a boy came to class and he had a pink ruler, if he was wearing a pink shirt, would it be okay to tease him? Go bring it back to respect. Of course it's not. We respect all students in our classroom. We respect all students at our school. So I wanted to talk about a book. I want to talk about a classroom experience. The one I'd like to share with you now is, I spent 15 years in the closet as a California teacher, 15 years out. My first year out was the last day of school. And I had a student who was helping me clean up in the classroom. He was folding posters, rolling them up, rubber banding them. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to come out to my students. I said, I was tired. I'm tired of hiding and being ashamed of who I am. I shouldn't be ashamed of who I am. All of me, including my sexual orientation. And he asked me, he said, "Mr. C, what are you doing this summer?" I said, "Well, I'm spending it with someone who's very special." He said, "Oh, your girlfriend?" I said, "No, my boyfriend." So he went, didn't bat an eye. Excuse me. I didn't bat an eye. He said, "Mr. C, can I go out to recess?" I said, "Of course you can." He went out, came back, he brought a student with him, brought this 12-year-old girl. She said, "Mr. C, may I ask you a question?" I said, "Of course you can." By the way, I was their teacher. I had them for family life, sex ed. I had parent permissions to talk about family life and these things. Not that you would need one to talk to a child if they had concerns like this. But if you're wondering why, as a teacher, are you allowed to talk with them? Just to cover my bases on that situation, I would argue that I had their parent permissions to talk with them about family life kind of questions. So she came to me and she said, "Mr. C, I have a question. I have the same problem you have." And I said, "Well, I'm not sure if I'd consider it a problem, but I think I understand what you're saying." She said, "I'd like to ask, another question." "Sure." "What if my parents and I don't agree?" Well, here is a 12-year-old in a public school identifying as lesbian, already recognizing that she's different from those around her, recognizing her girlfriends are having attractions toward opposite gender and she wasn't having those things. So I told her, I said, "Well, my children, I have 3 children who are very evangelical." I said, "My children and I don't always agree, but we always find something else to talk about. We love each other. We just don't argue a lot about that one topic," which is sad because she, would want her parents' support. And then I directed her to some resources. In junior high school, you'll have counselors you can talk to. And so there is a support group for LGBT youth right across the street from your junior high school. There was a church that was affirming and accepted homosexuality. And so I directed her to some resources. But anyway, LGBT kids, they are in our classrooms. Research shows 5 to 7% of students will or are identifying as LGBT. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time with that, but I also wanted to, third thing was just to remind California teachers about some of our guidelines. This comes from the California History and Social Science Framework, and you can also find some similar language in the English Language Arts Framework. So there is chapter 20. The year right now is 2025. I believe this is still current. When I Google History, Social Science Framework, this is what comes up. So chapter 20 is on access and equity. It starts out by reminding that we are teaching all California school children, all, including our LGBT children and youth. So there are inequities in the classrooms, and there are gaps, and there are unsafe conditions because of rejection in the schools. Now, CDC has a lot of statistics as kids, because of rejection in unsafe schools, teasing, are experiencing things like high absenteeism, high dropout rates, suicide attempts, bullying, and these things cause problems in the classrooms, like they miss school. And it's our duty, there's a law, and I don't remember the specific law. I remember the title, Duty to Protect, for that law. We have the duty to protect all California school children. And this says unsafe conditions because of their sexual orientation right there. So it explicitly acknowledges that duty and that population in our classroom. It's a shared responsibility that we teach a balanced curriculum. Here's culturally responsive teaching guidelines. Just a reminder, one is exude a positive disposition. Promote positive dispositions toward diversity among all students. So don't censor LGBT curriculum out. That's not having a positive disposition. Here's another characteristic of culturally responsive teaching. Recognize cultural and experiential backgrounds. Make connections between student experiences. If they're LGBT, and you won't survey them, but research shows 5 to 7% of our population is LGBT. That means in a class of 30, you are most likely to have 1 to 2, maybe 3 LGBT kids in your classroom. I did every year, it seemed like. Make connections. And here it talks about the curriculum and the standards. It says, fill the gaps in the curriculum by adding relevant examples of diversity beyond the standard. Now, I had an argument with my administrators because I had mentioned Harvey Milk in my 6th grade classroom, and then I got a notice from one of the district administrators saying Harvey Milk is not in the 6th grade curriculum. I said, well, neither is Martin Luther King, and it's certainly okay to talk about him. Neither is Sandra Day O'Connor, and it's certainly okay to talk. So she was censoring, and that's called, by the way, that's discrimination. And I filed a lawsuit against, that was Modesto City Schools. That's a long story. We had a 5-year lawsuit starting around 2017 when I filed a complaint to the Department of Fair Employment and Housing. Got a right to sue letter from them, had to find a lawyer, went through the discovery phase, the deposition phase, and we settled out of court. I have a brand new 2024 Toyota Tacoma truck, thanks, gift of Modesto City Schools. Anyway, I'm not going to go into that, but we are allowed to highlight positive contributions of Senate Bill 48. So that's what it's all about. You're allowed. And what happened in my classroom talking about Harvey Milk is we were talking about actually Martin Luther King's great speech. We were comparing the video to the actual written speech. And then we started talking about martyrs, and kids said, what a martyr? And I mentioned Harvey Milk. And then I got a letter saying, hey, just a reminder, Harvey Milk's not in your curriculum. That's harassment, by the way. If you're a gay teacher, stand up. Stand up for your students. Just more, let's see, there's a couple more things from the framework. I think that's about it. Just making sure kids feel safe. Oh, here it is. Increase students' access to inclusive curriculum like Senate Bill 48. It's right here. Make available and share age-appropriate literature that reflects the diversity of humankind. More LGBT curriculum. Teach students by example and through discussion how to treat diverse others. We're supposed to have discussions with our students how to treat others. So when the students, I remember I mentioned I was getting married to a man, and my students said, ew, that's disgusting. Well, guess what? That's an opportunity to discuss with students how to treat diverse others. When you hear the F-A-G-G-O-T word in your classroom, that's the time to have a discussion with your students. Hey, I remember I identified myself back then in 2015. I said, hey, I'm gay, and I'm insulted by that. And guess what? An administrator called me into her office, said, you know, you don't have to identify as LGBT when you say that. That's discrimination, by the way. That's discrimination. My argument there, I said, you know, well, when the other teachers talk about their opposite gender husbands or wives, they're identifying their sexual orientation. So unless you're going to tell all teachers, don't let the students know whether you're heterosexual or homosexual, then it's discrimination. Anyway, I'm going on 16 minutes. I don't want to spend too much time. Thank you for your attention. My goal is to put more of these online. Read a child's book, talk about experience from the classroom, and just reminders from California laws. God bless you. God bless all of your students. Hang in there. Tiger Craven Ely. Having fun talking with you about LGBT. Bye.